The thing that was happening in my family when we decided to reach out to His Heart Foundation was my son, who is sitting next to me, was going through a significant mental health crisis. And the reality is we didn't have experience in the arena of mental health. I've been in the ministry for over 30 years, and I've ministered and loved people in all different situations, but something happens when it comes close to you. It almost paralyzes you, and all of your training and experience seems to go out the door. And I think my wife and I realized that we needed help. We couldn't do this thing alone. And I had the opportunity to meet Wayne Summers, who's the executive director of His Heart Foundation, through a good friend of mine who I worked with. He knew my story, and he said, I have someone you need to meet, and that was Wayne. And I sat down with Wayne at a Chinese restaurant and shared our side of the story, because Josiah, my son, has his own side of the story. And then Wayne put me in contact with you, Angela. The thing that really brought us to a place of trust for His Heart Foundation was a couple of things. One, when your back's against the wall and you don't know what to do, you're pretty open.
Yeah, definitely.
You're pretty open to help. And so if I could be as honest to say we were desperate, that's one thing. And then being a Jesus follower, I have learned to trust God in His ability to put people into our lives. And the timing of meeting His heart couldn't have been better. And then upon meeting you, Angela, you just kind of know. You know that you know. And my wife and I looked at each other and said, yeah, this is a God sent. We know that this is what we're supposed to do, and we can trust.
I was 16 years old. I started having different kinds of thoughts that weren't really like sane thoughts. And I just thought, well, it's the enemy, so I just don't pay it any mind and just kind of brushed it off as something that was just an occurrence. And then I had an experience that was like real crazy. I had like a complete mental breakdown, and I wasn't even high. It was just like from, I guess, whatever was going on with me at the time that I didn't know. And what happened was I heard this voice yelling at me like really loudly, and then I went blind for a minute. I couldn't see anything. And then the voice was just yelling at me, and like I was begging to God to like help me. And then this voice just pretended to be God, I guess. And it was just like telling me to kill myself. So I picked up my guitar and I tried to sing a worship song that I was singing to God that I made before. And the voice was just like, yeah, play that song like you said you were gonna do for me. Like it was just a complete like mockery of the Spirit of God. And that was my first encounter with like mental illness, where it was like schizophrenia. And so that carried on throughout my years, and it only happened one time, so I figured, okay, well, that happened, but I can get over it. But as time continued on, slowly but surely, I just sank into a place of where I was out of touch with reality, and there was a different reality that became my reality, involving so many different aspects of the story that I couldn't even tell you all of them right now. But I was just living in a really mentally ill place, and I came to the conclusion one night that I wanted to get out of that place, and I didn't know where to turn. So I was like, well, logically, like, police are here to help you, or hospitals are here to help you, so let me call the 911 emergency number and see if I can get something to take care of what was going on with me, because I had a moment of reality where I was like, okay, you're not safe. Like, I was like not safe at all, and I was just acting out in reckless ways. And So that's when I reached out for help. So I got admitted into the hospital, and I was actually at a regular hospital at first, and then I told them what was going on with me. This was my second time being at the hospital in that week, and they asked me if the last hospital that I went to did anything about it, and I told them no, they just sent me home. So then they told me about, well, I think they told me about this place called Rainier Springs. It was there that I started taking medicine. My dad gave me your number, and I reached out to you from there, and that's kind of how that went.
You know, every parent, you know, has their dreams for their kids, and whether they're very specific or general dreams. But I don't think there's too many parents that would envision, you know, their son or their daughter having to, you know, be in a mental health facility. So I can't say that we were prepared for it, but, you know, as any parent knows, you know, the commitment to be a parent is a life commitment. So it doesn't matter whether they're little or whether they're young adults. You know, we're in it to the end. And so that's kind of how we approached it. And you know, Josiah's always been a really strong, very sharp individual, very creative, just kind of always stepped out and took the lead in new relationships. And to see him in this place is probably something I can't really articulate well, that anyone would understand. But to see him lost in his own head was undescribable. And then going into the facility was like a whole nother world, because in those facilities you see various degrees of mental illness, from people who, you know, are moderately ill, and then people who are, we might categorize as lost or gone. And it's scary. I'll just be honest, it's scary. And there was one time in which, you know, my wife and I, we would cry before we got to the place, kind of, you know, get ourselves together, and then we would go in, and then when we left, we would cry all the way home. Now, mind you, this is all while God has called me to pastor Mount Olivet here in Portland. And I'm thinking, God, did you make a mistake? How can I do this during this time? But what he did say is that this is something that I'm going to weave into my plan for a greater good. But I remember specifically the Holy Spirit telling me, when you go in, I want you to treat everyone like they're your family. And that was a game changer for me. So it didn't matter how far out there someone would seem, I would literally envision them as a family member. And I would talk to them, and I can remember one guy, and he was talking about some pretty way out things, and I would look him in his eye, I would address him by his name, even though inside, you know, I might be still trembling. So it was a difficult time, but it was also a place where I believe God arrested that disease. And though I would never want to see him back there or anyone there, it was the beginning of a journey of healing that's brought us to this point, honestly.
So the difference between like a year ago and now is night and day. Like a year ago, I was like, just, I don't know, an example is like when you see people on the street like talking to themselves or yelling or like harming themselves or whatever, like that's exactly what I was doing. And I was just completely scared for my life, and like I was just kind of locked into that place. But now it's like I have peace, like there's peace in my family, like I can have a good relationship with my dad and my brothers and my mom, and I can just really appreciate like sanity. And I can look back and just be like, wow, I was gone.
Everybody, you know, every life matters to God, you know, and sometimes when you don't understand, it becomes a barrier. And God in his loving kindness somehow allows us to experience these things so that we can learn to love people where they are, which is the hardest thing sometimes to do. But I think it's changed, Josiah and his perspective. And he's always had a tender heart, but it's just gone to a whole nother level, and it's certainly gone to a whole nother level for us as far as, learning to love people where they are, irrespective of the packaging, right?
I would definitely say to people that are going through mental crisis or mental illness to reach out to someone professional, because the medicine does really help, and it's not just like something that sedates you. Like, there are anxieties that come with mental illness that you can have treated, and I think it's definitely important to reach out to someone who's Christian because, that's my personal opinion, but I believe it's important because there's a faith in God that changes your circumstance to where when you're going through, you can actually hope in even the afterlife. You can hope in heaven. You can hope in God restoring you. You can hope in things for the future. It gives you like a perspective that's like, okay, there's an outcome that is possible, instead of, oh, I'm here and I feel like I'm gonna be here forever. It gives you like an outlet. And so I think definitely talking to people that know God and definitely taking measures into your own hands by going to someone who's professional and getting medicine, I definitely think that's important. Faith in Jesus has really been like a key component because like there are so many times I wanted to die and just be done with it, but I didn't have faith in God at the moment because I was just going through so much. I was like, God can't be real. So faith in Jesus has given me like hope, and that's pretty much it. Like, it just gave me hope for something new to happen to me, like a future to happen to me, like me being able to like communicate with people. So I think early on in my life, knowing that my dad was a pastor, there was like a high expectation on us, just in terms of like morality and like following the rules, being like this good kid. And I think I failed a lot of those things when I was young because I was hard into drugs. Like, I was just doing everything that I shouldn't have been doing. And I think that was just me rebelling because I wanted to be like my own independent person. And I wanted to just like be myself and not like have these expectations on me and feel like people were like looking to me to be this certain kind of person. But like over time, I think it's changed. Like now I know it's a blessing because I tell my parents all the time, like they're the best parents ever. Like, and I know that other people like think their parents are the best parents ever. But I tell my mom and dad, like, I'm always like, Mom, you're the best mom ever, because it's like, they're Christian and they raised us in a way that we would always know that God was God, and we would always know that Jesus was God, and that there was no other reality. So, but in the back of my mind, going through everything that I went through, I always knew that Jesus was God. So now that my parents are, like, my dad is the pastor at the church, it's like I get like personal pastoring, you know what I mean? Like I get that, just someone to walk beside, and it's like I'm not lonely because I have people that I can confide in and stuff like that.
You know, if someone is struggling, you know, first of all, if you're a pastor and you have members that are struggling, or if your family members are struggling, if you're struggling, I think the very first thing is you have to know that you can't do this alone. You know, I think there's so many things that stand in the way of getting help, and one of them is shame, and one of them is pride. You know, another is sometimes there's cultural barriers because maybe certain culture groups of people are not used to seeking professional help from
like therapists,
psychologists and psychiatrists and psychologists. But you have to be willing to reach out for help. And often you don't really know where to go to do that. And personally, I found that His Heart Foundation was kind of like the one-stop shop for getting help. And I really mean that because in this arena of mental health, it's not clear-cut, it's not straightforward. It's a growing industry, it's a growing discipline, and they're still on a steep learning curve. That's what we've discovered. And so it's so much easier to go to one place that can have already sorted all of that out and direct you where you need to go. So getting to the place where you're willing to ask for help, number one, and then knowing where to go to get it, number two. And I recommend His Heart Foundation. So in the African American culture, historically, we haven't necessarily been a people familiar with reaching out to psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists for help. Probably in addition to that, there hasn't been a significant number of African American psychologists and psychiatrists. And in most culture groups, an initial barrier to trust is being able to identify. And so it stops a lot of African Americans from reaching out. One of the things that I've learned is that when you're suffering with mental health, there is an aspect of that suffering that's just raw humanity. You're suffering on a human level, and you're in crises. Somewhere in there might be some cultural issues. But when I've talked to some of my fellow brothers and sisters, I've tried to encourage them to consider reaching out, even if the help is not in the same skin tone. Because when you're in a crisis, you have to be able to be helped at a human level. Once you've stabilized at a human level, that is, depression is gone, or stress is gone, or anxiety is gone, or suicidal thoughts are gone. Once you've stabilized at a human level, then we can have conversations that are deeper about culture and race and things going on in our society, and if need be, even switch therapists and find someone that can help. But it's real important to manage the human crises first. I would also say that in our cultural context, we've got to be okay with just sharing our struggles in this arena. And I've been real open in our church with our story. And as a result, I've had a lot of people reach out to my wife and I quietly saying, hey, we need help. I have a son, I have a daughter, or I personally. And we've been able to direct them. And we've had to have honest conversations about therapy and race and these kinds of things. And we go back to that issue. Right now, you, sir, you, ma'am, are in a human crisis. Let's address that first. When you stabilize, then we can talk about finding more culturally relevant help.
I think personally for me, the important thing was to get my thoughts and my emotions out. And one way to do that is like counseling and therapy. Also, music has helped me just to be able to speak my mind and have that conversation and that emotion pouring out and just being able to reflect over it and just listen to it and just kind of understand where I am at the moment and just be present. That really helped me to have like a positive outlet.
And his music is amazing. I'm just saying.
I love it.
Hey, that's a take.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing Christmas together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling